أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Today I'm going to read out from this article, my book, Wisdom from the Quran. This is one of my favorite topics, 3 stages of the development of the soul. The almost inexplicable mystery of life and death can be explained in the Quranic framework by understanding that the soul gives life to the body and the body dies as soon as the soul leaves it. The fetus in the womb, in spite of being biologically alive, becomes a living thing only after the soul is blown into it. In Surah As-Sajda, which is the 32nd surah or chapter of the Quran, and verse number 9, it is said, "Then he improved it and breathed into him of his spirit." That is, God breathed his spirit into the human being, into the fetus, and then it became a living thing. The nafs, ruh or soul, defined as a refined body by Imam Ghazali, needs nourishment, exercise and training, just like the physical body. Since the soul is made up of ethereal matter, it wants to live in the other world, and its dislike for the material, the worldly and the base. The aspiration of the soul is to be rid of the base qualities and desires of the body and to travel higher and higher in the spiritual realm until it finally finds complete bliss in proximity with God. The Sufis often look upon the body as a cage in which the soul is trapped. They long for and strive for the time when the immortal soul will be freed from this mortal cage. At that time, the purified soul will at once soar into the highest realms of bliss, while the unpurified soul, though free, will only be able to hover around the base and gross things that it always treasured. Since there are 3 broad stages of development in which the body and the soul progress hand in hand, therefore the human being has been described as a developing soul. Now, I find that if you divide this development into 3 stages, it becomes very clear and obvious. But some people have also divided into more stages, like 5 stages, and I think that sometimes they overlap and it's more confusing. So anyway, in these stages, they are called, the first stage is called the Nafs Ammara Bisu, which is found in Surah Yusuf, which is the 12th surah, verse number 53. And this is the lowest or base soul which commands to be selfish. It can be seen in action in small children whose main concern is self-interest until they are trained to be different. If left untrained, the soul can become selfish and evil. And if you look around, you come across so many selfish people in this world, and it seems to me that these people did not get enough training for them to develop from the Nafs Ammara Bisu to the next stage, which is the Nafs Lawwama. And they still remain evil and selfish. Now, you look at young children, they are innocent, but that is the nafs that they have at that time is the lowest stage, and you find that they're always saying, I want this, I want this, I want this. So at that time, they just want what they want. Now the next, if they're given the proper training, firstly by the parents, especially the mother, and then if they go to school, then the teachers also teach them to be less selfish. And then gradually, the Nafs Lawwama is developed. This is mentioned in Surah Al-Qiyamah, which is the 75th surah or chapter of the Quran, and verse number 2. This is the blaming or the self-critical soul or the conscience. That means now, Nafs Lawwama stage, people have developed a conscience. After this, I think mostly they have to develop themselves. Now, there is no need for another person to keep telling them this is wrong, this is right. They have to develop themselves. And this final stage is known as the Nafs Mutmainna. This is mentioned in Surah Al-Fajr, which is the 89th surah or chapter, verses number 27 to 30. This is the highest stage of the purified, blissful soul, which is above reproach. The first self-centered stage, the Nafs Ammara Bisu, is a necessary vehicle of bodily existence. It is necessary, and that's at that stage. It helps to survive by providing a certain amount of selfishness, the instincts of survival, self-defense, and developing the great potentialities placed within us. Here the soul's main desires are to fulfill the needs of the physical body, to collect and hoard physical possessions, and the desire for self-promotion. All these desires keep pulling it down spiritually. Since the complex human mind has been given the gift of a free will and choice, therefore, at this stage, the person refines as well as complicates the primary needs of the body into secondary and more complex urges of greed for worldly things. Thus, we find that the basic need for clothing and protection is taken towards very complex and complicated directions, which will result in being obsessed with extremely expensive designer clothes. The basic need for food ends up in developing a penchant for gourmet cuisine. The need for rest and privacy can lead to acquiring the most elaborate housing, bedding, furniture, and furnishings, etc. In this process, the monsters of competitiveness, desire for superiority, lust for all kinds of luxurious comforts and entertainment and worldly possessions, and the desire to acquire fame is born. To achieve these ends, a person can become unnecessarily dishonest, destructive, deceitful, aggressive, and cruel. But greed breeds greed, and the more one gets, the more one wants, until one gets caught in a whirlpool of insatiable desires related to this dunya or this world, accompanied by an absence of peace in life. If you read or see some of the interviews of people who have accomplished a great deal in this physical world, then you find that they have hardly any peace in this world. I'm not saying that this world should be totally ignored. One has to live in this world, one has to work for it, but just focusing on this world and its worldly pleasures is something that does not give you peace. One of the positive aspects of this stage is that since parents think of their children as being an extension of their own beings, they are helped at this stage by this selfish instinct in accomplishing the difficult task of bringing up children, protecting them, and providing for them with great love and care. But the upbringing of the children also depends upon the stage the nafs of the parents has reached. The higher the stage of the nafs, the better and more spiritual will be the training that the children receive. According to Shahidullah Faridi, the nafs Ammara Bisu has a forceful energy and has also been compared to the untrained wild horse whose good qualities cannot be utilized. If the rider has not learned to tame and master it, the wild horse will run away with him and destroy him. When proper training is provided by the parents and teachers in the early stages of life and later when the person himself strives in trying to acquire the values of honesty, mercy, and following a balanced middle course, the nafs is ready to reach the second stage known as the nafs lawwama. This term is mentioned in Surah Al-Qiyamah, which is the 75th surah or chapter of the Quran, verse number 2. I'd like to mention here that Shahidullah Faridi was a British person who belonged to a very prosperous family, and even as a child, if something was served them, they were totally British and they had no experience of or exposure to Islam. But if this child was ever served pork, he would feel nauseous and he would go and vomit. And so also other things which are haram. And then when he grew older, he had this dream that he was supposed to go to India and to meet a certain sheikh there and to become his disciple, which he did. And he came here, and then after partition, he came to Pakistan, and he was married to the daughter of that sheikh, and he lived the rest of his life in Karachi. So he also wrote many books. And in one of his books, The Inner Aspects of Faith, he has an article on the development of the soul. The person is now ready to move on to the nafs lawwama, or the second stage, and it is also known as the blaming soul, or the soul which now has a conscience. So this is the second stage in which he has developed a conscience and starts feeling remorse at any wrong committed and seeks forgiveness even for a negative thought that strays into his path. That means now no one is telling him that you've done something wrong, but he himself is telling himself, his conscience is telling him that he has done something wrong. The whole drama of human choice and free will and accountability to God for one's deeds and the tussle that goes along with it can be seen enacted clearly in this stage. The development from the first stage to the second is not a progressive linear movement, but is a back and forth movement like that of the chessboard. Soon a longing for the sublime can be kindled. It appears that no outside control is now required since a conscience and a longing for the sublime has developed. The main goal in sight is the akhirah, or the hereafter, and not this dunya or the present material world. The final result is that selfishness decreases, altruism increases, and giving and sharing become more satisfying than taking and hoarding. In this second stage of the development of the soul, all natural urges can be satisfied, but in the balanced manner prescribed by God. The inner desire for superiority is transmuted into an effort to excel morally and spiritually. The desire for aggrandizement and showing off is transformed into desire for being able to help others in a big way. The pleasure inherent in making sacrifices is also experienced. A high office is taken as an opportunity to benefit mankind. We can go back to Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam, who said to the king who had asked for an interpretation of his dream, he said, if you make me in charge of the treasures of this land, then I will be able to help. Here we are reminded of Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam. After interpreting the king's dream, he offered to take up a high position, it's like a minister of finance, so that he will be able to manage the 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of drought. And in this way, he provided a benefit to Egypt as well as to the surrounding areas. So this high office is taken as an opportunity to benefit mankind. Gradually, desires are harnessed, and the wild beast of the nafs ammara, instead of being a violent and harmful creature, is now a tame and helpful companion. It is now ready to move on to new territory, the highest spiritual stage known as the nafs mutmainna. The nafs mutmainna, the satisfied or blissful stage of the soul, is reached through a lifetime of constant training, abstinence, prayer, fasting, and zikr or remembrance. In Surah Ar-Ra'd, which is the 13th surah or chapter of the Quran, and verse number 28, it is said, those who believe and whose hearts find peace in the remembrance of God should remember that only in the remembrance of God is there peace for the hearts. So the only way to achieve peace in one's heart is to remember God. Material desires know no bounds and bring no peace. The only way to peace is the contemplation of God. This is the highest spiritual stage one could ever aspire to achieve. A person at this stage gives up the base pleasures of the world, continuously tries to rise higher and higher, follows the prescribed values of behavior as well as worship, and excels by moving on from obligatory worship to offering voluntary devotions, vigils, and sacrifices. Thus the soul reaches the stage where no pain or hurt seems to matter. All the charms of the world fade away. The nafs in this stage guides and helps God's creation with mercy. The satisfied soul feels compassion even for those on the evil path and prays for their transformation and salvation. The only goal in sight is to move closer and closer to God, to obey and to love Him, and to be loved by Him. The nafs in this high stage loves God and all His attributes, and therefore God guides it towards light, purity, refinement, beauty, and harmony. The nafs is also concerned about God's creation and deals with them with sympathy and kindness, since God Himself has said, my mercy precedes my wrath. This is a Hadith Qudsi, which is also found in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. The qualities of selflessness, sincerity, generosity, which are really an outpouring of love, are highlighted. The perception of the nafs at this stage is synthetical, as opposed to being analytical. That is, the nafs can perceive things and form an opinion about their totality. The love of the blissful soul for God in this stage is made up of three parts. A sense of utter dependence on God, resulting in humility, submission, singing of His praises, worshipping Him and asking Him alone for His bounty. Second, the desire to please Him, to devote oneself for His purposes, and to sacrifice all for Him in performing His will. The highest aspiration of the soul is to achieve union with Him, to become the mirror of His light, and to give up its own imperfection by becoming the reflection of His perfection. The greatest reward for the good soul, which has reached the stage of the nafs mutmainna, the moment it has been waiting and working for, the final and complete harmony and proximity with its Creator, will be when it will be welcomed by God Himself into His presence and to paradise on the day of judgment with these words. I'm going to quote from Surah Al-Fajr, which is the 89th surah, verses number 27 to 30. O blissful soul, return to your Lord such that you are pleased with Him and He with you. Enter with my devotees, enter my paradise. So this is how the blissful soul or the satisfied soul will be welcomed by God on the day of judgment. All right, now we come to the end of this essay. If there are any questions, we can take them now. All right, we can say a little prayer. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وأدخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين ثم آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى. And may your every tomorrow be better than every today, or may your hereafter be better than the present. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin Nabiyil Ummi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa barik wa sallim. Thank you very much. Inshallah, we'll see you next week. Jazakallah khair.